Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man. Hope you're doing good and well. So it's now time for me to finally talk about book 4 in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series, House of Chains. This follows on from Memories of Ice, of course, and this is an interesting book because the structure of it's very sort of, as with Erickson, it's kind of unpredictable. As you go from part to part or even chapter to chapter of each book, you're not quite sure what theme, what characters he's going to have next, what sort of part of the world he's going to be in, sometimes even, what part of his world he's going to introduce, which gods he's going to be teasing us with this time round. And so with House of Chains, I will say the first part was actually pretty easy to read because it follows really one pretty specific character called Casa Orlon, who has actually got, like a supporting cast of 2 or 3 really interesting characters, namely Byroth Guild, you've got Delum Thord and Torvald Nom as well. Really kind of interesting characters. They're like basically, Casa Orlon is this pretty brutish, savage person, but he is shaped by, and he's kind of, you see him adapt to his changing situation in this story and how he's shaped a bit by the characters around him. And it's really it makes a really good reading. And I know that Erickson deliberately focused the first part on this character Casa Orlon, apparently because of the criticism he had drawn from his previous books, where he has so many characters and he doesn't spend too much time on one particular character for very long. So that is apparently, that's what I've read, that's apparently why the first part of this book, Faces in the Rock, is pretty much entirely dedicated to Casa Orlon. Now, where I struggled with House of Chains was parts 2 and 3, which is pretty much the middle section. And now I do remember on my first read of this book, because this is only the second time around I've read this book. When we get to Midnight Tides, that will be my first time ever reading Midnight Tides, so I'm really looking forward to that. But I do remember struggling with parts 2 and 3 of this book, getting through those sections in particular. I found a real struggle first time round, and this time round again, here we go again. I found it pretty difficult again. Not like Gardens of the Moon, where I actually found that a little bit easier second time round. Still found them, these middle parts of House of Chains, and I think it's because he does what he did quite a lot in Gardens of the Moon, where he's where Erickson's kind of jumping between lots of threads and lots of characters. He has quite a lot of, there's quite a lot of build-up in House of Chains, I think, in parts 2 and 3, and a lot of the story development. The second part, we are sort of getting more involved and more insights into the sisters, who at the end of this book really come into focus. That is, of course, Adjunct Tavore. Tavore? I don't know how on earth you say her surname. And Felicin, who is, of course, Sheikh Reborn. And he digs deep into those characters in this book as well. And again, it's interesting how the characters around those characters shape their character threads and their stories too. As I say, I think the book comes to a really quite dramatic finish as well, which I really enjoyed in the final part. So, final part, House of Chains, I thought was great, actually. Books 2 and 3, Cold Iron and Something Breathes, I found a little bit trickier to get through. Just found it really hard not to get bogged down, or not to feel like I had to keep rereading, pages. And you're struggling with the book if you have to keep rereading pages over and over again. And, I think this is what a lot of people say about Malazan, is that it can be a struggle at times, but it's rewarding in the end. You just have to take your time with it. And I think that's been the difficulty with me prepping this video, has been that I have had to, take my time with it. I wanted to do this review quicker than I have. I wanted to have it up within, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, but I just realised that it's difficult. Because these books take quite a lot of time to digest and appreciate. A bit like, you know, when you're doing reviews of really technical albums, you need quite a lot of time to do those reviews. It's a bit like this with an Erickson epic fantasy novel. Anyway, but I did enjoy this visit of House of Chains. I would say, to be quite honest, it's probably not my favourite of the four so far, and maybe even my least favourite of the four so far, but I do appreciate the Castle Royale part, and I do like the more dramatic moments in this book a lot, when they come too. It's just I found there was a lot of, you know, a lot of stuff to get through, you know, which at times can sort of, yeah, just difficult to traverse through so much detail in this book, I found anyway. So let's go to my favourite moments of House of Chains now, without any further chit chat. So this is the spoiler part of the video. You'll find this with the other three videos I've done from Malazan. These are always the kind of spoiler parts of the video when I talk about my favourite moments of each book. So to begin with, we have got page 237. And this is an analogy that I think Torvald Nom uses when he's explaining that Darujhistan is too big for the Malazan Empire to sort of take over. And what he says is, I suspect should Darujhistan ever become part of the Malazan Empire, the empire will be like that shark, and Darujhistan, like Barog, will choke the beast that swallows us. So, you know, it's kind of like a good analogy of, you know, something being too big to control and to, you know, in the case of this analogy, to digest. Almost a little bit like this book in a way. And then the next favourite moment I've got, you may have to bear with me when I do this. So I really liked when Felasin realises, you know, Shaikh Reborn actually realises that her brother Paran is still alive, and she cries. And she's with Heboric in this quite amazing moment where it says, she wept for a long, long time, and he held her tight, unmoving, as solid as he could manage. And each time the vision of his fallen god rose before his mind's eye, he ruthlessly drove it back down. The child in his arms, the child she was, once more cried in nothing other than the throes of salvation. And of course, it's forget that, you know, Shaikh Reborn is essentially Felasin, right? And Felasin is in this story 15, 16, 17 years old. You know, let me know in the comments, but I believe she's like a pretty young teenager. And for all she's been through as well, it's no surprise that she feels emotional about Ganus Paran, I think, her brother. And you know, she has this really interesting relationship with Heboric, who is an amazing character in this book and in Dead House Gates. And the way they become close together is really, really great. So one of my favourite parts in this book was certainly Onrak and Charles Sengar, and I think the moment when Onrak is attacked by these hounds, or one hound in particular attacks him. He tries to fight back in this moment. So Onrak's blade was a midnight blur, flashing to kiss the creature's thick-muscled neck, but the swing cut only dusty air. The Tilan Imas felt enormous jaws close about his chest. He was yanked from his feet, bones splintered, a savage shake that ripped the sword from his hands. Then he was sailing through the grainy gloom. So he was in a pretty bad way after that attack. Yeah, I quite liked those segments. Very imaginative, the way Erickson wrote those characters. I thought they make some interesting choices with how they get themselves into trouble, those characters. Now, I remembered this, that the next favourite moment is just one sentence. And I remembered this sentence from my first reading because it hit me so hard. And when you read a sentence like this, it's just one sentence, but on my first reading of this book, I remember this. And I kind of wanted to cling on to this sentence because I was like, you know what, this is just such almost like a metaphor for life in a way. One of the most wonderful, you know, at times Erickson's writing is fantastic. It is absolutely, well, quite often he writes some great stuff. And I love these kind of like metaphors that he does sometimes. And this is like, this is it. So he says, this is when it kind of like Feddersen is kind of remembering Tavora. It's like a bit of foreshadowing before what happens at the end. And it says, the stigma of meaning comes, let me start again. The stigma of meaning ever comes later, like a brushing away of dust to reveal shapes in stone. You know, I just think that's great, sort of explaining that feeling of, you know, when things become, when you start to see the truth in things and the meaning of things, that maybe, you know, it's like with that moment when you have insight into something in your life or into a person, and it's like suddenly the dust comes away and you can see that person or maybe that thing for what it is or what that person is. You can just see it revealed, and it's just like that as a, you know, the brushing away of dust to reveal shapes in stone. I think it's such a beautiful description, and it stuck with me so much I kind of wanted to cling on to it, and I couldn't remember which part of the book it was, and now I've kind of bookmarked it so I remember where that actually was, because I really liked that the first time around I read it. Now the final part is the kind of climax of this book at the very end with the sisters, and it's so tragic what happens here. It's essentially when, without realising, Adjunct Tavor kills her sister. A thunderous clang, this is the moment, a thunderous clang, reverberation jolting up her right arm, and the sword's unnerving weight was suddenly gone from her hand. Then something punched into her chest, a stunning blossom of cold fire piercing through flesh, bone. Then she felt a tug from behind, as if something had reached up, clasped her hauberk and yanked on it, but it was just the point, she realised, the point of Tavor's sword. I mean, there we go. So that's, you know, as always with these videos, I kind of be doing pretty short reviews, non-spoiler reviews, and then my favourite moments with the major spoilers. So I will put a warning up on the video, obviously, of the major spoilers in the kind of second half of the video for you all. Next up is Midnight Tides. As I say, that is going to be the first time I've ever read Midnight Tides. I can't wait for that. Really looking forward to that book. Otherwise, from me, thanks everybody for joining me for this Malazan video. Once again, Malazan fans, do let me know in the comments what you think of House of Chains, how you rate it. Is it one of your favourite books? What are your favourite moments? I would love to hear those from you. Otherwise, from me, take care, everybody. Bye for now.